So, okay,
Thanks,
go ahead,
everyone.
Jim, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. So, just quickly wanted to just a little bit about Empirical Path. Thanks, by the way, Ian, for the introduction. Here's a little bit about Empirical Path. We're a Google Analytics certified partner, but we also have relationships with Core Metrics and Omniture. We're a web trends agency partner. Here are some of the clients that we've worked with. You can see quite a diverse set of industries. And so really excited about this topic today. Here's the agenda. If if you're using Google Analytics, you know how often the tool changes, and new features are released every week. It seems like we've taken the time to really focus and surface 3 of the most high-valued new features and updates within Google Analytics. These features you may not be aware of. Some of them you probably might have heard of. It depends on like I said, how often you look at the tool. But literally, every week something changes. And really, these are tools that will make you a rock star to your CMO if you start to use them. Really, the information that can come out of these reports is super valuable. There's basically the first thing that I'm going to talk about is A/B testing. Essentially, what is kind of come into Google Analytics from Google Website Optimizer. This is a super valuable feature that allows you to really let the data tell you what content is the most successful by testing different variations. And then we'll look at a relatively new feature that was pulled out of Google Analytics Premium, actually a paid version of Google Analytics. If you didn't know Google was offering a paid version, this attribution modeling is a feature that is now available for free and is extremely valuable. Finally, we'll have a look at Universal Analytics, which is the newest version, sort of the successor, to the async Google Analytics version. And this represents probably the biggest change to Google Analytics so far. It allows you to see, for example, if somebody goes from an iPhone to your website as the same visitor, and tracking offline conversions and things like that. So let's get started and talk about a really big change that happened recently inside of Google Analytics. I'm trying to advance the slide here. Preston. There we go. Sorry. So Google Analytics lets you lets you test different versions, and this is different things that you can test out. For example, ad copy, calls to action on your website, offer a discount. It even lets you test versions like different color buttons and pages that are served up. And what happens is the page serves up automatically, so you can test different versions and see what what pages are the most successful. So wanted to just give you a little bit of background for who's actually, maybe an example of who actually is using the tool. I'm trying to advance the slide here. It's not advancing. Sorry, guys. You guys advance up. I think we're having a little bit of a delay here. So who's actually using the tool, and what did they get out of it? Here's an example of a client of ours, Capital, that was able to produce a lot of value through content experiments. You're looking at the original landing page and lead sign-up form that Capital was using on its website and its mobile platform. And Capital is an award-winning Wall Street brokerage trader that has a gaming interface. And they're a very heavy social component to their site and app. And they compete with Schwab and E-Trade and ShareBuilder. And really they want to be able to understand how successful their landing pages are and who is signing up with them. And the call to action, as you can see here, is the sign up button for a brokerage account. So we set up a content experiment in Google Analytics to find out which version is the most successful, and basically in having people complete the form. Just trying to advance the slide here. I think we're having some delay issues. Sorry appreciate your patience here. Let me go one back. So as you can see, their landing pages were featuring sort of a gaming-like interface. We worked with the design team to create 4 different versions of classic gaming. You can see Pac-Man, Mario, if you're old enough to remember Pac-Man and Mario and Space Invaders. these pages were served up equally over the course of about 2 weeks. Usually, in order to get statistical significance, that there has to be a certain amount of visits. It's usually around 1,000 visits to determine statistical significance. And basically, what we did was we tested each of these versions and set up a content experiment. What I wanted to show you next was the sort of what it took to sort of set this up in Google Analytics. Trying to advance the slide here. Sorry, guys. And really, these the setup for Google Analytics content experiments is relatively straightforward. You're basically looking at a setup screen that is relatively straightforward. You're basically putting in the URL for each of these versions, and what happens is Google Analytics will serve these up equally. And I believe you can have up to 9 variations. And you can see here the setup screen showing you basically the, literally you're putting in a URL here. And, version 1 would be a certain URL, and version 2 would be another URL. And like I said, you can have up to 9 variations. And just relatively straightforward setup. And so basically each experiment has to have a goal, and they call in content experiments a winner. And so or I guess it's called an objective in this case. And you can see that the number of visitors, the percent of visitors was 100%. So you can actually make this number a little bit lower. You can go down to 25%. And essentially, you're creating a goal. In this case, it was, in our case, it was basically figuring out the signups that happened on the website. And so, you can see, just like Website Optimizer, there's a relatively straightforward flow here. You just basically put some code on a page, and then you publish that experiment to the site with this JavaScript code here. And then there's a little bit of validation that kind of takes place on the back end, and so now we can see this is actually the results from this is actually a real experiment, although the data is disguised. But you can see here that that we had 15 days worth of data, that 100% of the visitors were included, and then you can see that it's Angry Birds was the winner, and it was the data that decided that that surfaced this, not sort of just serving up different versions, and actually in this case we can see that it had a 99% chance to beat the original one that we saw before. And so this is super important for Capital because they can understand really what is driving conversions and let the sort of the data speak for itself. Okay, so next we're going to talk about 2 features in the free version of Google Analytics. As I mentioned previously, there's a paid version, but attribution modeling is a fantastic feature that really will help you better understand the value of the traffic sources that lead to conversion. Then we'll talk about a relatively new feature in Google Analytics that lets you upload cost data into Google Analytics, such as affiliate marketing. Sorry, I'm just advancing the slide here. Before we get started, I wanted to give a little bit of background on attribution modeling. Basically, by default, what Google Analytics does is it goes by a last-click model, and really this is essentially the model that's built by default into Google Analytics, literally on the traffic reports through the entire interface. Sorry, I'm trying to advance. Here we are. So, we can see in this example that organic gets about 100%. Well, organic gets 100% under the last-click model, and so if I downloaded a white paper, if I first came from paid search, email, and then did a search and downloaded the white paper, organic would get all the credit under the last-click model, and this is basically, really what you see in Google Analytics now. And basically, as attribution is a lot more complex. When you look at visitors that come to your site, there's a series of decisions that people make before they purchase. So it's almost never as simple as somebody buying, purchasing, just seeing a display ad and then buying. So we can see that if somebody goes from display to organic or social, that often isn't surfaced in Google Analytics. It is actually through attribution modeling, and we'll show you a little bit more detail in a minute. But just wanted to start at a very high level. As we talked about, there's by default there's a lot of interactions behind something that happens. So here we see social and display and paid, and organic actually occurred, and then email was the last click. And you can see the same thing on natural search, where you go from brand to generic to back to brand search and then convert. So essentially, what we can see is that what it comes down to is the vast majority of customers, potential customers have multiple touch points. Overwhelmingly, the last click always gets noticed, and basically, we're able to give credit to the various sources that contribute as we go along. Sorry, here we are. So you can find the Attribution Modeling Tool. It's located on the sidebar under the Conversion section. You'll also see the MultiChannel Funnels report listed here. MultiChannel Funnels has been out for almost 2 years, and you can see that these reports are based off of some default groupings within MultiChannel Funnels here. One of the coolest parts of attribution modeling is the ability to compare multiple models at the same time. So what you literally can do is, you'll select either last click or another model, and by default, you'll get this last click model, but you can basically add new models as you go along. The thing to remember about this is that attribution modeling is really about showing you the steps that lead up to a conversion on your website and how to value those by surfacing them through different models. So let's take a dive and look into some of the different models. So as I said, the last click model, it's the default model. It's a good starting point because you have you're coming from the perspective of what you have in Google Analytics now to start to analyze. Someone started out, let's say, with paid and did a Bing search and bought. Bing gets 100% of the credit. Outside of attribution modeling in Google Analytics, 100% of the credit goes to the last non-direct click in the last 6 months. And then you can see that if you look at the first click sources, you can see how those sources fit in here, and you can kind of start to see a little bit of different values starting to come into the equation. You can see how organic and social contributed and in what order. Here, we see there's a lot more different models that we'll go into shortly, but then basically you can see the change between last click model and first click model. So if I came, let's say if I landed from paid search, and it's basically showing me that 70% more people, 70% more conversions occur within the first click model. So the green arrows will show you increases, and then the red arrows will show you decreases. In this case, we see how cost per acquisition is much less, $8.58 compared to nearly $6 in the last click model. So you can see that there's a 71% change in conversions. And then if you drill down inside of paid search, what you see is that Google CPC, in this example at least, was the mostly the key driver and accounted for 59% of the first 59% more conversions on the first click model than on the last. And I can see here that I have a great return on ad spend of 293 for my last click interaction, but on the ad spend for the first click interaction, I see it's at 487%, and it's so if I wanted to sort of go deeper and sort of figure out the keywords that led up to that and what are the ingredients that led up to that, I'll show you more about in a minute. And so now inside of Google Analytics, you can actually you can actually upload, as I said, you can upload cost data, and that actually will let you understand. So if we go back a slide, I see here that under LinkedIn, in some of these sources, they're all zeros, and if I wanted to really understand, well, what is my return on investment if I could import all the cost data directly into Google Analytics. Before you couldn't do that, but now there's a new feature in Google Analytics that actually lets you upload the cost data, and so you can see it's a relatively straightforward setting under the property, and you can see here that I basically can just upload a CSV file that might have my LinkedIn and Bing and other costs that I paid on these ads. Actually can upload that right to Google Analytics and see that data kind of right in line with attribution modeling or really any report in Google Analytics. One important thing to, yes.
Yeah, I just want to chime in. I mean, I know we have lots of clients who ask how should we use these reports? How do we look at the attribution? And what I often find myself telling clients is, while we don't necessarily know what model is the best model for that particular industry, we can at least use this data directionally. So if we compare first click versus last click, whether or not that's the right attribution model, we can say, hey, look, this channel, if we kind of look at all the numbers, all the various attribution models, this channel is doing well or this channel is doing bad, right? And so because we show these reports to clients and they're, it's almost too much data, but we do find directionally they're extreme, at a minimum, they're extremely valuable.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think that the model that you choose, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the model you choose really depends on the business model that you're driving. So if you're a car dealership, the sales cycle is a lot longer, and so your look back window is going to be at least 90 days, and this is actually a thing that you can set inside of Google Analytics where you can go down to like a day or up to 90 days. And so it's just the same as a different model that you choose, and there's custom models as well. And really, it just depends on how you're marketing and what you try to value and try to understand the value of somebody coming in, is social coming in before, let's say, an email. Did somebody find out about you? What was the first thing that they found out about you? And some things are that might be more valuable to others. For example, like a new business that's trying to drive brand awareness, that's going to be a lot more important. So you're going to want to look more at the first click model. So one size doesn't fit all, and so we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward here. But basically, really the model that you choose, there's literally like as you can see here, there's several actually variations to the last click model, and then you have first click, linear, time decay, and in some of these, and then you have custom models. I'll show you a little bit more about that in a second. But basically, choosing these models is really important in understanding which one. That we talked a lot about the last click. The last non-direct click is really the last interaction before. Oftentimes you'll see in Google Analytics direct gets credit for things, but the last non-direct, and sometimes those shouldn't count because people have already been, maybe they're in your sales cycle, or maybe they're in the sales funnel, or they're in the consideration process, and direct is really less important. So you can sort of take this out of the equation here. The last AdWords click, gets 100% of credit in this. So if you're doing a lot of paid search, this model makes a lot of sense. Like I said, first interaction, we talked a little bit about where that gets 100% of the credit, and really that's the most valuable when you're trying to drive brand awareness, and something where that value might be super valuable to understand, the long tail of things. Linear is really about giving equal credit to each thing across, so you're not valuing something. So time decay, if you run a 1 or 2 day promotion campaign, you might want to give more credit to those interactions, maybe to the days leading up to the promotion. So in this case, a time decay, where you have like a short sales cycle might make more sense to put that in place. And then position-based rather is something where you're understanding a hybrid between first and last click, where you're trying to understand, the introducers and the closers. What are the best sources for helping you close a sale? So let's look a little bit at the custom model. What you see here now is that I'm not actually employing these ones that we just discussed. I actually have last click, and then I have something that's called the lower funnel and the upper funnel, and then also I have branded search as well as non-branded search, and basically these are the custom models compare, really weight things. The lower funnel gives more credit to searches toward the bottom part of the funnel, and then the upper part of the upper funnel gives more credit towards early searches that contributed to conversions, and de-emphasizes direct and brand search, and so what we see is, if we dive in, beside the custom model, you can actually click on, beside these multi-channel funnel groupings, you can actually dive in directly to sources and say, well, okay, well, what are the sources themselves that are giving different values? And you can see here that I can quickly, I see that the source CritSend, which is an email marketing tool that is used, that the difference is 212% under the upper funnel compared to the last click. So I have 115 conversions using this model versus 65 on the last interaction. So you can really start to see, which channels are making a difference. And a lot of people do campaigns. You can see here that there's a specific campaign that shows me that this one that's highlighted, this campaign here, gives 2 conversions under the last click model, and then under my upper funnel model shows 27. So you can see that this under the last click this would only get 2, and so you see there's a lot more kind of going on under the hood there, and then that's a 1,200% difference plus. That's a huge weight. So you can really understand sort of what are the key things that are really adding value to your campaigns as you go along. Finally, as I mentioned, you can see another. You can actually see these are disguised keywords, but you can actually dive down into the keyword level and really see, like, if you're doing, say SEO, or if you're doing, paid search, you can really see that the upper funnel, shows us that 101 conversions actually occurred under the keyword Google Analytics, and that this keyword Google Analytics audit, which is disguised, but just shows you that the 136%, it's more, conversions are valued a lot more in the upper part of the funnel, and so it bears more investigation. Finally, I wanted us to talk about universal analytics, and as I mentioned, this is really the huge shift in the way that the Google Analytics works. It's probably the biggest change really ever to take place in the tool, which is why it's really important to know, because things are changing drastically inside of Google Analytics. And you can see when you actually go to set up a new profile, you can see that Google Analytics is featured here on the left, and the classic analytics is one that you're more than familiar with now. And you can see that really the main difference is the custom dimensions here, being able to do offline data, being able to track across multi-platforms, configuring different. So you can see that they sort of insinuate that then select new releases will sort of come in this, so this sort of forcing everyone to sort of go over to universal analytics and move away. So they're really strongly moving from this model, and you can see that some things it's in beta, but you can see that some things aren't actually quite there yet. AdSense and Dart for advertisers and remarketing, content experiments that we talked about, it's not supported under universal analytics. So So what is universal analytics? I mean, it's a broad term. As I said, it's a newest version of Google Analytics that changes the way the data is collected completely. The custom dimensions and metrics are actually take place inside of the tool. It sort of really replaces the custom variables that was that's part of Google Analytics Classic, and the stuff is stored right inside of the Google Analytics interface, and it allows for customization of new dimensions. For example, things that you wanted to put inside of Google Analytics when somebody buys something, like what was the profit margin on the widget that I sold, that you can actually put right in line as you are selling or putting, tracking on your site. You can actually pass things directly to Google, and it moves away from this notion of visit-based, which basically has been, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but really I think the strong, Google's way ahead in terms of being able to track offline conversions, like literally, like I said, refrigerators. You always hear about this sort of prognosticating, like we're going to know what you bought in a refrigerator. Well, you can literally send anything to Google Analytics, and using what's called the measurement protocol. And this is really literally, I can take some code, slap it in a browser, and it will register in Google Analytics. If you've ever used real-time Google Analytics, you can see that if I actually type that in my browser, boom, right away, that I actually can see that page show up in real time. Excuse me, and so that could literally be somebody buying something from a Square mobile app or something that I want to set up. And so this is really strongly all about offline conversions and ways to track things, not just on the browser side but on the server side. And so the setup is relatively straightforward. You can see inside of the custom dimensions we saw before, where you're literally going to enter in into Google Analytics different dimensions, and I'll show you some of these in a minute. But basically, these are like your custom variables, where you have a hit, which is like a page level custom variable, and this is like a visitor level custom variable. And you literally are setting these up inside of Google Analytics, and I believe you have up to 20 of these, whereas in the classic version you have only 5. So there's kind of an incentive to go that way. And so this notion of how is Google Analytics, universal analytics different? You can see that as Google Analytics works right now, you can see that the client ID, as I go from my mobile device to, let's say, a desktop, to another mobile device, and to a gaming console, is all going to be replaced with the user ID. And so this is really, just one that you can set in Google Analytics. Obviously, you have to log in to Google Analytics to see it, but basically, this is going to allow you to see the person going from one part of your website. So if you have a mobile website and then you have one that's let's say let's say a gaming console or something, or an app, that you can see that in the current model, every time I actually increase, I go from mobile to let's say my Mac here, I'm count as 3 unique visitors. And actually under Google Analytics custom dimensions, I show up as as I go from different from place to place, that you see this number here does not increase, and so I show up as one person across every device that I do. And of course, this requires a login or some way to identify yourself, but oftentimes there's many sites that do. Of course, you don't have to use Google Analytics in this way, but this feature functionality is available to you. And so basically, what this really what this looks like when you look at actually reporting is you could actually see a user ID inside of Google Analytics. I can see where I came from desktop to mobile, let's say on this specific account, and then I can see that I've actually, I'm the same person, but I actually bought on mobile instead of the desktop. And I can also see things like, did I download a white paper? Any questions? I think we're at the end, towards the end of our presentation here.
Yeah. So we definitely have some questions.
Yeah.
I'll try and go through them by the different sections. There's a question around, is the A/B testing part of the free version of Google Analytics?
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is actually. Yeah, you very much can. The only distinction is that you have to use classic analytics and not the universal. So A/B testing is definitely fully available inside of Google Analytics for free.
Okay. In regards to, so this is kind of an open-ended question. When looking at the attribution models, you have clients who swear by last click. Like how do you get them to be a little bit more open-minded in terms of looking at these other models and realizing that it's not just about last click?
Yeah.
It's
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, it's a tough it's a tough argument to make. I mean, I think it's easier if you can sort of couch it like, here's last click if we're looking at it, and maybe being able to offer multiple models and saying, well, okay, if you want to look at last click and value, let's say, organic search, I think it's just another report to surface. And I think as you start to dive deeper and ask more questions, then you can really start to understand, where to better spend money and where to give credit as it goes along. I think, it's sort of it's sort of like one of these entrenched models that's tough to break out of that everyone has been talking about for a long time, and so it's not an easy it's not easy to convince people to do that. But as you're making decisions on where to spend money, I think that you really need to start paying attention to this stuff.
Yeah. So going back to content experiments, are there any best practices about the percentage of visitors to include in the experiment?
Oh yeah, good question. I mean, I think it just depends on the level of traffic that you're getting and the type of website that you have. In my example, Capital wasn't getting as much traffic as let's say a bigger brokerage site, and so it just depends on how you want to how you want to expose different parts of your site to the experiment. If it's it's not going to get in the way of if let's say you don't necessarily want to learn about the results as fast, that if you use a smaller percentage, it's just going to take you a longer time to get statistical significance. You really have to have about 1,000. The bench sort of a general rule of thumb is around 1,000 visits will be able to show you enough data. And so if you can get that by showing it to 25% of your audience, then it depends on how much traffic you're getting.
Yeah. Okay. Going to UA, question around how are user IDs assigned, and can you upload email addresses?
Let me take the last question first. You absolutely cannot upload email addresses. No personally identifiable information. So it really has to be something, an ID from, let's say, your back end or some kind of ID that really it was exposed, let's say, through an e-commerce report or something that we were using before. So that really hasn't changed. Google doesn't want you to enter anything that's personally identifiable. And the first part of the question was
how are user IDs assigned?
Yeah, so the user ID is something that you can set yourself, override, or it's defined automatically in Google Analytics. So you can override the user ID with your own ID, and so literally if somebody logs in, that's really how you're going to be able to understand that who that person is. Of course, you can't inside of Google. It's sort of kind of a weird thing, but you can't really put the person's name. But then if you wanted to go back into your own CRM and understand who that person is through the user ID, then you can do that. So it's a good question.
And then in terms of, so I've heard when setting up UA that even Google recommends setting up just a whole separate profile
Yeah.
So that you still have classic running in the back. You still have basically all both running side by side.
Yeah, great
Is that
question. Great point. Yeah, so they do recommend that you actually probably should have mentioned this. Yeah, you want to run them both simultaneously. Certainly, you can. I think Google kind of wants people to sort of become accustomed to the idea, and so they basically made it a little very compatible to run with the classic and the regular account. And basically, yeah, when you set up, you do need to run. You do need to create a new account. So another UA number. So for example, if it's UA 12345-1, then you need to set up UA 12345-2 in order for that one to be. You can't make a classic one into a universal one at this point. But it does. They will. You can send some universal analytics to a classic account, if that makes sense. You can send some data into a classic account. It will support, custom dimensions if your universal analytics isn't set up yet. That makes sense. But yeah, it's so.
okay? Okay. Well, Jim, thank you very much. I mean, there's a lot of. It's hard to take it all in when there's so many updates that Google is pushing out, and some of this is fairly technical, but I think this is a great overview of what some of these new features are. So again, everyone, this we will send out probably within the week a link to this recording. If you have any other questions regarding GA, point at Empirical Path, here is the contact information. Feel free to reach out to myself or Jim. And once again, just want to thank everyone and hopefully have a great rest of the day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.